Hey there! It's been a while. About a year worth of while, I would say. A lot of stuff happened during that time, but most importantly, I'm working on a new video game. So let's talk about that. I'm Don, and this is deVlog. Last time we were talking like this, I was making a budget Pokemon ripoff, basically. I was working on that for like 3 months. Until I asked myself the question, why exactly am I making this? It kind of started off as a joke. I was drawing Pokemon with some friends of mine, and we were all shit at drawing, so they just came out really bad. And then I was like, hey, why isn't there a kind of ugly Pokemon game where you take care of these just completely unappealing little creatures? And I still think that's kind of a fun idea. But I came to the point where, okay, if I'm going to continue this, I have to spend like 2 whole years realizing this project, and you kind of need a good reason to do that, like both financially but also like creatively, I guess. And I couldn't really answer the question, why am I making this? Why am I making this? As a joke. Is as a joke a good reason to make video games? Sometimes, but I think this time I felt like, you know, there has to be a little something more. In addition to that, I found that when I pitched the game as ugly Pokemon spa management game. And when I said that to friends, the thing that people were excited about was the spa management part. And it was also by far the most underdeveloped part of the game. So either I felt like, oh, that's where the magic is, I have to redesign the whole game to kind of fit that, or I have to just reevaluate my goals entirely this year. Because, you know, I have kind of unlimited creative freedom at the moment, but it's temporary. I have a year of social benefits left, and I'm kind of looking at it as a temporary time, because at some point I will have to get a job again. And, you know, I can do like freelance stuff, but maybe I have to get a full-time job. I don't really know yet how that's gonna look like. But at least I'm gonna have less time and energy to work on like completely my own stuff. So, you know, I have to kind of be strategic with how I'm gonna spend the rest of my completely creative freedom time. So yeah, I decided to kind of reevaluate my goals. What am I gonna do with this time? And, you know, I'm doing need to narrative videos. I'm exploring narrative design, so it would make sense for me to make a more narrative-focused game, right? Because that's where my passion is. And Clysmoids, the budget Pokemon game, was not that. So I figured out that my biggest goal with this period of time is to be able to make something that I can look back on and just be immensely proud of. You know, something experimental, creatively fulfilling, with a sense of purpose, I would say. And I had kind of many ideas bubbling at that time, kind of at the time of our last vlog, I would say. I had a lot of ideas bubbling in various departments of game design. I had like a social deduction card game, a tabletop RPG, you know, modular kind of open source framework thing. I was working on a Vampire Survivor type first person shooter, and I was prototyping kind of an interesting thing about collecting, exchanging, and sharing rumors as kind of a social economy mechanic, basically. Felt like I was an unguided projectile a little bit, going all these different kind of, you know, ways in a sort of fervor, and never really focusing on one of them and finishing them. So I felt a little bit like in the dark, I would say. But luckily I had a big trip coming up back then that I've been planning for like years, to South Korea. Big trip to South Korea. And it was coming up during that time. So I could kind of fortunately leave it all behind and get a fresh perspective on things. So yeah, I went on a trip together with my partner. We went to visit family, we saw the sights, we ate a bunch of good food, and it was honestly just a fantastic trip all around. And, you know, we were both kind of interested in culture and history, just in general. So we saw a lot of kind of historical sites and tried to, you know, immerse ourselves a little bit in the local culture and just the history. just history. At some point we went to the National Museum of Korea, which is in Seoul, and they had just the most beautiful Joseon Dynasty artworks, art pieces. Honestly, just like from any time period in Korean history. But the one that stood out to me specifically were the ones from the Joseon Dynasty. There were like, you know, art pieces by masters from that time, Kim Hongdo, Jongseon, Angyeon, and they had all these beautiful different art pieces. Ink work, paints, calligraphy. It's all kind of intertwined. There were portraits, there were landscape paintings, but also kind of just historical documents. Like not documents, but paintings specifically created to document historical events. A particular piece that stood out to me was painted on these panels, kind of dressing panels, which was a common gift to give kind of tribute to members of the royal family, that commemorated the events of a feast, a particular feast. I forgot which one it was, but I think it was a feast specific to, as tribute to the king, to kind of celebrate the royal family. I'm not entirely sure which one it is. I should look it back up. And it was these panels that illustrated the courtyard in which these festivities took place, and the procession of peoples and entertainers and cooks that made these meals and kind of like perform traditional dance and such. And I was standing in front of that I must have stood there for 15 minutes looking at these kind of pictograms. And there was something about it that felt very alive to me. Like I could almost see the little characters kind of dance on the artwork. Not that it was like super realistic or anything. It's just that the style that it was painted in, with all this white space and all this room, it was very kind of as little pictograms almost. But I could, like, there was something about it, about the colors and about the poses that felt really alive to me. And I could almost see, you know, the characters walk around and enjoy the festivities, or sit and like, you know, respectfully observe. And there was something about that just really enchanted me in a way that I thought this would be like fantastic as a video game. Just something about the perspective, you know, about it was almost isometric in a way. I think that, like, camera work could be very interesting in a video game in that style. And so that was hugely inspirational to me. And then together with the fact the rest of the exhibition also explained the painters' methods. So the techniques and the pigments that they use, the texture and the type of canvases and paper that they used. Extensively researched and documented in that museum, which was fantastic. It was so interesting, and it tickled the part, like the technical art part of my brain. I used to be a professional technical artist, and just immediately I wanted to kind of try to capture the essence of this art style digitally somehow. But obviously I was on vacation. I didn't bring my laptop or anything, so I was like documented all of it and kept it in my brain and made notes, but never actually did anything with it. And then went on the rest of the trip. We went to many different places in South Korea. We tasted so much good food. Oh man, so much good food. Saw the sights. I completely forgot about this kind of, you know, video gamey shader thing. We went to Japan as well, so like that was the palate cleanser in a way. In the meantime, I did like share my game ideas and, you know, all the mechanics and prototypes that I talked about before in my Discord server, link in the description by the way. And a lot of like creative peers and friends of mine commented on it, and a particular comment stood out by a good friend and creative confidant of mine who had seen the kind of rumor gathering information economy idea that I prototyped, and it reminded him of Sulla, which is a Roman general, I think, who allegedly kind of rose to power through his relations with sex workers, who used to have all these kind of, you know, information and secrets from through pillow talk, which I think was a great type of story for this kind of mechanic. And this kind of story, interestingly enough, you can find it all through history. Like it spans multiple cultures, multiple eras of like sex workers or otherwise just people from low birth who through information and relationships, charm and wit just kind of climb through the ranks to the upper echelons of society. So yeah, it's quite ubiquitous in different time eras and cultures. You know, there's Aspasia in ancient Athens, There's Sao Haiyan in the Han Dynasty, there's Nelguin, there's Amrapali. Sorry for butchering all those names. Then the list goes on. And I think that's so interesting that it's so ubiquitous and international and extremely underexplored in video games, I would say. How many times in video games do you just like play a sex worker who gossips, you know? And that's your main mode of interaction with the game? So that was hugely interesting. But that all happened while I was on the trip. So yeah, while being on that trip, things really start to percolate for me. And then when I got back, I got to, you know, doing like art direction tests for that Joseon Dynasty art style, and it was still sticking with me. Things started to coalesce a little bit. I want to make a narrative game. I want to do something in a Joseon Dynasty art style. I want to do kind of like a sex worker adjacent rise to power through information. And I feel like all those things could be together, you know? It matched. There was no discrepancy between these ideas. Yeah, so I was thinking about back to the Joseon Dynasty art, and I was thinking about why that too was so underexplored in video games. I know there's a couple of games who do it, but they usually tend to, you know, incorporate fantastical elements like zombies or like monsters or stuff and magic and whatever. And I felt like having a historically accurate Joseon Dynasty setting is not really something that I've seen in video games before. So that was hugely interesting. It's weird as well because Korean pop culture is like reaching its all-time high in popularity, especially in the Western world now. It's like, it's so popular. Like K-pop is super popular, K-dramas are everywhere now. Even Joseon Dynasty specific K-dramas are like, I know many people in the Western world that enjoy that. So why not video games, you know? So that was my thought, and that's when all those ideas and inspiration started to converge. So yeah, I'm at this point, I'm just really interested and excited to start marrying those ideas together. And with that, I want to announce my new video game, Rumorweaver. It's a working title. The concept of Rumorweaver is it's a historical narrative game where the Joseon Kingdom's most beloved Kiseng, which is kind of a courtesan of low social class, trained in, you know, poetry, fine art, and music and stuff to entertain the Yangban, the upper class, is imprisoned for treason by the king, which is an act that shocks the entire nation, but none more so than you, the daughter of said Kiseng. You have about 1 month before your mother's execution to figure out a way to influence the court to release her somehow. And you go about this by gathering and exchanging rumors, separating the fact from the fiction, following leads to infiltrate the palace or the court somehow to change their mind. And you do this via kind of like a novel social currency mechanic that forces you to deduce what information you can gather from what kind of person. That makes sense? So that's very interesting, and you know, I prototyped it and it worked kind of well, so I'm working on it now. It's also kind of inspired by Pentiment, which is also a historical narrative game that has art inspired by its time period. It's set in medieval Europe, however. What's cool about this is that I started pre-production for Rumorweaver and talking to people about it, and they said, oh, you should check out Pentiment. I knew about Pentiment, it was already in my backlog a long time, but I hadn't played it yet. And so during pre-production, I started playing Pentiment, and actually like a lot of the mechanics are kind of, you know, were things that are also designed for Rumorweaver, so that there's a lot of like parallel thinking going on, which kind of confirmed to me that not only is this kind of commercially viable idea maybe, it's also something that can't just work as a video game, which is just hugely comforting to me and kind of confirms the fact that this is the path that I want to walk. If I can somehow create the same sense of curiosity of history of a time period that Pentiment instilled in me in Rumorweaver, that would make me so happy and creatively fulfilled. So yeah, I've been already super excited to dig into the history, culture, and traditions of South Korea, and already found so much cool stuff as well. Like, let me give you an example. There were these people called jonggisu, which were basically storytellers that would narrate a book just in the streets. Because back then, novels became very popular because Hangul, the kind of modern Korean script, was invented, and women started writing a bunch of novels and stories. And then the woodblock printing technique was also imported, kind of made books and novels become widespread media. Not everybody had, the education to read yet or the resources to buy a book. These jonggisu would be in the street just narrating these stories, and then people would gather around and listen to them, and they would be very dramatic about it. They would act out the voices and stuff. And then right at the climax of the story, right before the climax of the story, before the big resolution, they would stop reading until people would give them money. So basically everybody would be completely enraptured in their story, and then would have to throw coins at them until they were satisfied enough to read the conclusion of the story, which is honestly just the narrative equivalent of edging, which I thought was very, very interesting. So yeah, there you go. That's one of those interesting things that I found, among many others. So then, how far is Rumorweaver along in its production? Well, right now I'm creating some kind of demo, kind of as a proof of concept. I want to just have a little piece of content that you can play through to get a feel for the aesthetic and for the gameplay, and to see if it's interesting at all or if it's just completely boring. I'm gonna keep working on that for a couple of months. I hope to have something finished by the early next year, and I want to keep you in the loop in that development process. So that's why I'm, rebooting kind of the deVlog series, and I hope I'll post one of them every month, and then expect to have something playable next year that you can get your hands up, hopefully. I hope you stick around to join me in this journey. And then I also have a favor to ask. Right now, I'm just working on this by myself and together with a friend who does audio for it, but I would love to collaborate on this project, maybe start a little studio to make it official. So if you're of Korean descent, or if you have an academic interest in Korean history, specifically about the Joseon Dynasty period, and want to work on a game that tries to do it justice, hit me up, You can send me an email on contact@newtonarrative.com. I'll also put the email address in the description, and hopefully we can work something out. Voila! Alright, thanks for watching. Special little thanks to all the people who support me on Ko-fi. You know by now I have a little Ko-fi page, which is the best way to support me as a creator. So shout out to all the people who are subscribed there. A shout out to Sapulidi, Furion, Bob, and Danusai. Cheers! Till the next deVlog, I guess. Later!